Waiting for something. Oh, to go live. To hit that big blue button that is right there. There you go. And now we should be going live. So, oh, come on. Don't do this to me. Yeah, there you go. I can hear myself there. So everyone, hi everyone that just joined. I mean, you're probably joining. This is one of those, probably the fourth or the fifth. Hopefully my internet connection is good enough. I'm literally not well framed, but I'm in Spain. I'm based in London, but my mother has a huge array of grandchildren, and she's the drop-off point of all of them, of all her grandchildren during the summer, like most grandmas. She's got sick this week, so I literally she needed a hand, and that's what I did. I traveled to London. So I've got a really weird setup here. It's enough. I think it's going to work. The internet, fun enough, because I'm in a very remote village. The place doesn't have the town doesn't have a town hall. It's like a hamlet in a way. But I'm surrounded by bunks and beds where all my nephews and children all sleep. But it will work. You are also on a very unstable ground, aren't you, Tyler? Please introduce yourself and tell us from where you're moving to where specifically, because you need to unpack many boxes, right?
Many boxes. Excuse me. Hi. Yeah, I'm Tyler Pirtle. I'm a software engineer at Google. I currently work in license compliance, part of a group formerly known as OSPO, which is, as far as I know, an office that lots of different large tech companies have similar projects.
I'm surprised you moved from that name. It seems that those teams are standardizing on the name OSPO, which I find very explicit and very yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've reorged a little bit around internally, but same great taste, just slightly different brand name, I guess.
Okay,
yeah. But yeah, currently, based in Seattle, but now on an island in the Puget Sound. So Bainbridge Island is our new home here. So we're just getting used to it and just kind of feeling our way around.
Still Washington State.
Still Washington State, different county than Seattle, but still a commutable distance to Seattle. So that's
planning to become
a
fisherman.
Ride my bike to the office. Oh yeah, absolutely. Fishing, sailing, lots of water activities.
Fighting for the independence of Cascadia. Is that Cascadia the region?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that a lost cause?
No, I mean, if you ask, the people with the Cascadia flags flying around, they will tell you it's going strong.
Okay.
Probably a bit of a long shot. It's got that international component to it, where it's like we need part of Canada also to come with us. But
Cascadia includes part of British Columbia. I didn't know.
It does. It does, in fact. Yeah, I think it. I'm not super familiar with this movement.
Me neither. Don't worry.
You see the flags everywhere, but.
How does it look? How does that flag look like? Just out of curiosity, how would I recognize it?
It's blue, white, and green, and I actually believe that they have a symbol very similar to that. That's a
tree. Okay.
It's a tree. It's a pine tree. For the pine trees.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Green, white, and blue. I think with like a relief of a pine tree sort of in the middle.
Nice. Yeah. I really hope you enjoy your new place. Not only the physical house, which must be delightful, but also the island and the sound and everything. Because I mean, in my mind, anything in Washington State is absolutely glorious. Most of my imagery or my memories of it, although I've been only to a few places, come from Twin Peaks, the series from the 80s. Although apparently some of it was recorded there, but some of it was also recorded in California, just for the. But anyway, I guess it's just going to be glorious.
It's very beautiful. We have lots of beautiful scenery around here. Lots of water, very close to the Olympic Mountains. Lots of nature. Lots of that's one of the hallmark things people love about the Northwest.
A few volcanoes, not to.
A couple volcanoes, a couple.
You can't have everything
warnings,
positive.
Yeah, exactly, right. Got to live a little bit here.
So tell us a bit about your journey, not only to your role at Google, but when you and I were talking before, you've had because eventually the conversation is going to derive into SPDX and SBOMs and how those are vocabularies, taxonomies, ontologies. I'd be happy to have a specific definition of each one of them and maybe draw the difference. I don't want to nitpick or become really philosophical, but you were interested in this space, not necessarily in SPDX, but in in efforts to define a specific reality, a chunk of reality, which is my general definition of what an ontology is, from maybe a philosophical perspective, a vocabulary from a linguistic perspective. But anyway, you've been driven to this sort of like thinking in the software world for years now, right? Even maybe before that you joined Google, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So in 2007 or 8, I was living in San Francisco and in between jobs, and found this delightful little startup that had lots of people talking about a whole bunch of things that I'd never heard of before, and ontologies and the semantic web and all this kind of stuff. And I went to go work at this company called MetaWeb that made a made a product called Freebase. There's a lot of
nice
in and around the naming of Freebase, but it really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I had never thought of before. So I worked there. I worked as a middle tier software engineer. So we had this really large and very custom serving stack that had this massive graph database behind it that had something like 400 million facts in it.
Wow.
All bespoke, this massive million line long C program. Just this absolute beast. It's so interesting as well. Unlike anything I'd ever seen. I'm even to this day, I'm still fascinated with it. Just like its engineering effort, and also just like it's I don't know, like it's joie de vivre. Like it's got so many interesting little things in it that I had never seen before, and I was enthralled. Part of that as well was the community of people that were around it. That entire website was nothing if not for the swarms of people that had come out, largely people that were interested in things like Wikipedia, and that were really interested in certain domains, right? Like Honda motorcycles, or film or whatever. And they get really specific. But what these folks had started to do was to start to not only catalog, but also really break down what the various attributes of what their domains were made of. And they would do this modeling exercise, and they would really get down into the nitty-gritty details and try to describe these ontologies, right? These systems of describing these real objects in the real world. And they would meticulously categorize and break these things down, and then populate it, and then go out and try to actually populate the structured data. And this is at the time when semantic web was sort of definitely still in the fringe, kind of always been in the fringe. Kind of hanging
infancy,
out there,
maybe in its infancy, right? I guess.
Yeah, definitely in its infancy. And I'd worked at this company for years, and we were all having a great time. Everybody was, definitely, I don't want to say high on their own supply, but like everybody was like, we were all feeling it. Everything was like, yeah, this is amazing. Like this is good stuff. Like we all definitely love this. And then on April 1st. Work at Google Search after that, and part of the the motivation there was that this was sort of the beginning of revamping Google Search to incorporate that kind of knowledge into indexing and into serving technology for Google. So understanding at a deeper level the difference between Boston the place and Boston the band, and having an idea of some actual underlying structure, in terms of like what these entities are and what kinds of properties that they have. And it changed things like pretty significantly. Like, obviously we didn't have a lot of context about how Google Search operated before. But they definitely, we definitely saw how it sort of progressed and how it changed kind of with us. So yeah, coming back around to SPDX here, it's a lot of familiar things to me, and it makes me smile still, because I can see this community of people that have dedicated themselves to trying to model something that is inherently extremely complicated. The software domain, I remember thinking back, I was browsing through it after we talked, and I went back through the software domain and looking at how it was pretty underspecified, probably because, comparing it to what SPDX is today, it's hairy. It's a super complicated thing to actually model and to kind of break down.
You're right. I mean, when you were mentioning the conversations of the different domain experts in Metabase and the community, right? It reminds me of the conversations that the different committees at the SPDX community have, right? The 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 ambition of the goal, right? To map out all the packages, all the items in the software world and the differences between them, right? To define them uniquely and the relationships with them between them. And
Mhm.
it sounds very simple, but honestly, it's a flat two-dimensional world that has a lot of complications and a lot of nuances that are more easily perceived in the 3D world, in the physical world. And when you get
Mhm.
into the digital world, it gets really hairy. So when you were saying that conversations or discussions about definitions and relationships get really sometimes Byzantine and in a good way, but because you need that level of granularity in order to define something very specifically. And yeah,
Mhm.
the specific domain of software, which is the one that SPDX tries to map and define, is way complicated. And but it's a really friendly community. I mean, one of the best things. Let's leave the conversation for SPDX a bit later, but just as a nugget of value there, that the community is incredibly international, incredibly domain driven. We were having experts in security, obviously in the software world, but the software world is very varied. So we will have build experts. Like yourself in a way, or at least the people that use Bazel or Blaze, security experts. There's plenty of use cases, AI, data driven, or data sets, data scientists, people are flocking in like crazy because of all the raise in awareness and usage of Gen AI lately. So yeah, the conversations are fun. There's plenty of experts out there that make it so varied. And again, one of the core tenets and the core assets of this community is that it is an international standard, a freely available ISO standard, and that comes along with a lot of different national communities. The Japanese community is huge and strong, to mention just one, but there's plenty others out there. So yeah, the conversations are just fun. I would really encourage everyone out there listening that we just released a release candidate, SPDX 3.0 release candidate 1, and this is just bubbling up. All the conversations are great, so join anytime because you will be welcome. But yeah, let's move on to your actual charter at Google right now. So apparently you joined to help support or add to the retrieval engine and the search engine, whatever. But right now you're focused more on not only on OSPO and licensing matters, but specifically related to the build engine that has a twofold two. It's a coin that has two faces, right? One would be Blaze, the internal build machine build
Mhm.
engine that Google uses internally, and there's a open source version of it. Maybe version is not the best word to describe it. You you
It's
you,
fine.
you make it better. That
Yeah.
is Bazel, one of the most used build engines out there, in my opinion, one of the most complete ones. I hear of teams just moving. Snowflake just moved everything. I mean, months ago, it made a public announcement about it. But I mean, there's plenty of companies that have moved their super complex mono repo or software services oriented architecture to Blaze to Bazel. Apologies, and it's incredibly performing. So tell us about that, about those two, the difference, and what you do there specifically.
Yeah. I'll start with the former part here. Yeah. So part of my job is to ensure that uh, Google software ships within its obligations to open source licenses. So things like copyright attribution and source mirroring and things like that. And we do actually have the benefit of having all of our source code inside of a monorepo. So it's all there. It's all inspectable. I know where everything is. Um, one of the other benefits to this, I will say, is the software known as Blaze. You can use Blaze and Bazel interchangeably, I think, for lots of people. But yeah,
Okay.
Blaze is just the internal version of Bazel. Bazel is has different features, a lot of which I wish that Blaze actually did have. But there's things like, Bazel supports multiple repositories, whereas Blaze is pretty much hard fixed to it's
Yeah.
just Google's. Uh, there's a couple of other small differences, but the core of Bazel is this extendable this configuration language called Starlark, which is this sort of limited subset of Python, and this very interesting programming environment, this sort of runtime environment where when you're writing programs inside of Starlark, it's kind of a flavor of metaprogramming, right? You're writing programs that are describing how to build other programs.
Oh,
But it's also a kind of interesting graph based approach where there is this implicit build graph that you're operating with, and it's a whole thing, and I could honestly spend another week just talking about that. But I will say it's highly extensible, highly configurable. Both of those things make it challenging in certain ways
Yeah,
to
I presume
operate
so,
with,
yeah.
but you're able to
I
at
guess,
least
Python familiarity will help with onboarding Starlark,
absolutely.
right? Okay.
Absolutely, but there are still some other challenges in there. But I will say that it's a very rewarding experience. Blaze is one of the most reliable pieces of software that I've ever interacted with. So it's very consistent. It strives on being very consistent.
Yeah.
And so I think for that reason, it's it sort of has a lot of guarantees that it gives to you, and it never strays from that. At least in my 13 or something years of using it, it has never really let me down. It's got some
Incremental
quirks.
builds, also another thing
Yeah.
that most people really value, like caching.
Yeah. Caching, but it's reliability in terms of its
Yeah,
behavior. Like when it does something, and it does it that way for
exactly.
forever, and it's not going to stray from the path on that. And that's sort of its like, to me, that's its real strong suit. It doesn't do anything unexpected. Kind of like hobbits, I guess, right? Like never did anything unexpected.
Straightforward.
It's my jam. Yeah. So Blaze and my job. So yeah, at the moment, like I said, my job is to ensure that Google's in compliance as we're shipping products. Part of doing that is, whenever we ship a product, we have to identify what are all of the dependencies of that product. What are all the things that the third party code, right? All the code that Google didn't write. And we want to inspect those things, like any company would for license compliance, but also for other things, right? Like we're a large company, we have to deal with things like
Yeah.
export compliance, and we have to deal with security vulnerabilities and all these sorts of things. So it turns out that doing something like and then this executive order comes out, and then it turns out that wanting to satisfy the requirements of that particular problem look an awful lot like exactly the same problem that I have to sort of deal with, right? Like just identify all the third party stuff that's here.
Correct.
And so this is how I kind of got pulled into this, because we were already kind of working down this path. SPDX had already been interesting to me from the point of view of trying to do this sort of thing centrally across Alphabet. We do have teams that don't use Blaze. There are teams that are doing other things and working in other areas, various other operations. And so really it was this initially trying to identify, like, is there some kind of a standard that's floating around the internet somewhere that maybe would give me an abstract build graph? I really want an abstract build graph, something that kind of loosely defines all of the elements and maybe has a couple of interesting types with the attributes that I'm curious about. And then, oh look, here's this lovely SPDX thing, and I immediately saw RDF definitions, and sort of the rest is history. I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. Like this is to me, I can use this as an interface for other people to sort of target, to decouple all of our systems, from the teams that are, I can just a little abstraction. Teams that are using Blaze, great. Teams that are not, everybody can come together on SPDX, and everybody can do all the jobs that we need to do. So that was, and that actually happened right around the same time that this executive order came out for us. So I've been spending, the last, the last year or so with my collaborator, Tony Ayudo, who actually works on Blaze and on Bazel full time. And he and I have been working on this all together since.
Wow. Okay. So what I hear is that Google has a need, as the company that it is, that to map all the dependencies that it uses for And also, I think you didn't mention it, but I will definitely credit Google with this. Also, for reasons of good open source citizenship, I think Google has always demonstrated this. So you don't need any endorsement from my side, but I definitely see that everywhere. But also for legal reasons, even before the executive order. For those of you listening from Europe, CRA, so Cyber Resiliency Act, which is bound to become law somewhere in September, sometime this year, will probably require, if not the same, more strict things than the executive order. So bear in mind that it will go in the same lines as the executive order. But yeah, you were already prepared, and the overlap of requirements from your own and the executive order is almost complete. So then you were in line. Okay. And you said that some SPDX things were neat and sort of like fitted perfectly the picture of Blaze. Could you delve down into that a bit? Like, what is it specific? What were you trying to do? Were you trying to embed in Bazel and Blaze functionality that allowed for any user performing a build of the monorepo whenever that happens, to be able to to generate and eventually, I guess, export or consume an SPDX file of that build, but also please say so if describe that process if that's mostly correct. And how did you also enable those that didn't use Bazel and Blaze to be able to, I don't know, consume, ingest, maybe generate SBOMs from other build systems, or how did that work?
Yeah, so that was the goal. The idea was that Blaze already has this concept of a build graph, and it does have the ability to serialize its build graph. That's
okay, nice.
So in a variety of different formats, and I think Bazel has this as well, and it's all documented in somewhere in the depths if you go look for it. So really the thing that I had wanted to do was to transform that particular build graph to translate it into the SPDX ontology. So we've got this build graph. Can I translate that build graph into the SPDX one? The reason for that being that, there is this ecosystem of other software. And to answer your second question, for the folks that aren't using Blaze and aren't using Bazel that I'm working with, there are other tools out there. There's loads of tools out there, and some of those adapt more easily than having to have these teams switch over to Bazel entirely. So being able to leverage that whole ecosystem and all of these tools that other people in the community are already building, and using their tooling, maybe that was an easier fit, that was an easier sell for those folks to adopt those things. But then coming together again on this standard interface on SPDX as this is the format, this is the interchange, this is where we do all of our business. To go back to the initial thing about generation, what I said previously about Blaze's extensibility with this Starlark language, really that's kind of the meat and potatoes of how we get all this stuff done. So Blaze and Bazel have lots of ways for you to extend and configure. So in particular, the way that we implement this inside of Blaze, again, this is interchangeable at this point. There's this concept called aspects, and it sort of harkens back to, and if any of your viewers are familiar with aspect-oriented programming, not entirely unlike that, but Blaze effectively gave you this API that said every time we visit a graph node, run a little bit of code. And so what we do is basically we attach a little bit of metadata to every node in the graph.
Okay.
And it's that API style where it's like, you're kind of like a callback parser. You get called. I'm at a node, I'm looking at a node, and what's really interesting about Blaze is like I mentioned, the reliability and the consistency. So Blaze will always call you in a particular order. So it's always topographical graph ordering. So I get called from the place at the bottom of the graph, the leaf nodes first, and then I will get called consecutively up, and it's always it's always in like a left to right or whatever, some child ordering, something consistent. So what that means is that I can attach metadata to the leaf nodes, and then as I get called again, I can inspect any of the child nodes that I have, and they will also already have the metadata that I've already visited and I've already populated. So that means that by the time I get to the very final product, the thing that I'm looking at, I have this entire tree now that
Oh,
I had
fantastic.
populated,
Yeah, of course.
and it's got all my metadata in it. And now I can take all that metadata, I can serialize it
Oh,
in a
that's
useful
brilliant.
way to another tool. Excuse me. I can serialize it for another tool, and then I use that as sort of intermediate data to generate my final SPDX document. That I also use, because it's in Blaze, the tool itself is also part of Blaze. Rather, it's in my repository. So I've got also my tools have to be in Go. So I've got the SPDX Go library,
Hmm.
also from my colleague Brandon.
Yeah,
So that's
co-maintained by one of your colleagues at Google, exactly,
exactly,
and
yeah, yep,
contributor to the
yep.
build profile, which I'll explain in a minute.
Yeah,
Wow.
he's been fantastic in supporting us as we're moving along with that. So the whole
Okay.
thing ultimately gets generated in process. So the goal is I have this. I'm going to build some distributable artifact. I'm going to build some
Yeah.
artifact, and the idea is we want to be able to build that artifact, and in parallel to that artifact, also build the manifest, build the SPDX document that goes
Yeah.
along with it. So
Ah,
the
brilliant.
idea is that they are interlinked. They are, like
Perfect.
you get sort of both of them at the same time, and then we can we can verify those things inside with Blaze. We verify those things cryptographically to make sure that they have the appropriate integrity and sort of
Nice.
all that good stuff.
Nice. I feel we're at the point in time in which SBOMs have become really relevant, even more so than they should be in a way, because they should be boring like mature technologies. But we're at a point in time in which everyone, I mean, the most advanced students like Google have been involved in integrating this, as you described at the beginning, even before it was a requirement. It's still not a requirement. The executive order has not translated into something of a compulsory mandate, but it will. But all I'm trying to say is that I sympathize with many of the vendors out there. I mean, Google's not selling any software in this sense, but because everyone's striving to, everyone had already implemented, like you described in Bazel and Blaze, tools to do this. And now they are searching for something that is more interchangeable, international, and standardized, and they find the SPDX and others, by the way, they're out there. And and they have to do something to translate, right? So I sympathize with all of you, because right now it's a bit painful. You need to do the translation of the tool you implemented internally. And we find this across the board of the SPDX ecosystem. Like most tool vendors are kind of complaining a bit. It's like, oh no, I did my ad hoc custom thing. Why do I need? Because eventually down the line, like the SPDX community is so big, it's an international ISO standard. The work that we're putting there with 3.0, the release candidates, eventually will become better than your custom tool. That's at least in theory, because there's so many. Because it's a community dedicated to this, right? To this ontology effort, this taxonomy effort that is really, really painful. So someone's doing that work for you, and also because more and more tools are adopting SPDX, and that will make it all easier for everyone. But anyway, I sympathize with all of you and so forth. It seems very clear to me also that Bazel and Blaze were already very well written and engineered and architectured with that graph that you described and the metadata that each node included, for this to be the least painful, to be honest. Would you be? I wonder if I guess everyone's mouth is watering with how does this work, and you can't show a lot because for whatever, I mean, for reasons. Blaze is an internal thing, but show us as much as you can about the SPDX functionality and in general how software supply chain functionality, security, and transparency works at Blaze and Bazel. Sorry,
Yeah.
if you can share a screen, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll just quickly mention that a lot of the work that we do is around this, at least, is being translated into an open source project for Bazel. So we have it's called Rules License. And the idea here is really just to be able to provide standard license annotations for Blaze.
Nice.
So this concept of saying that I have software and it is licensed, and really just providing that particular annotation. In a lot of ways, a lot of Blaze or Bazel projects mirror a lot of efforts like SPDX, where there's an effort to provide a model for something. Like I have this community, I want to provide this model, and this model is useful in this particular context. And obviously the Bazel domain is, more like software and
Yeah,
compilers and tool
of
chains and
course.
runtimes and languages
Yeah,
and things like that. But very similar effort, like the idea of saying I have a thing, and that thing has a license, and that license itself has attributes. It has a copyright holder, and
yeah,
it may have certain conditions, and it may
yeah,
have whatever. And just being able to provide that schema, that schema is usually the thing that is inherently valuable. It's somebody's already written the definition. Somebody's already thought through what are all the cases that you need. And having, similarly to SPDX, one of the really valuable things from my mind is the fact that there is that community, that you do have these people showing up from all these different backgrounds.
yeah,
They're providing sort of like the maximum effect, because they all show up with something that the other person didn't necessarily think of. And that's huge. That's like a really, really, like, and it's that passion. It's that people show up and they like get, that was what made Freebase back in the day as well. It was entirely the community of people that showed up to be like, oh, I understand that domain really, really well, and like, let's have a chat about it. And then other people would show up, and then it kind of just spitballs from there. And that's great.
anyone interested in Bazel to know more, anyone interested in knowing more about Bazel should join the Slack community. It's great. Bazel is incredible for many reasons. Some of them just Tyler just explained them, but you can even do GitHubs with them. I know for a fact that the Adobe team, I'm fairly sure they use an Adobe Bazel. They've got GitHub's rules, so which sound crazy for a build engine, but you can. And you should attend BazelConf, which I don't know if this year will happen. Likely so. I'm just it just hasn't been announced, but it usually happens around fall. And last year was in New York, if I'm not wrong. I tried to attend, but I couldn't. But as Tyler was describing, is an amazing community. It has a specific domain with varied sort of like attendees, but a specific domain. You must be interested in build systems and CI and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a really welcoming and incredibly useful if you're interested in fast builds, reproducible builds, consistent builds, and many other and software in general. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just amazing. So if you don't mind sharing your screen and going ahead with this.
Let me show just two things really quick. Here's the Bazel, the rules license
Oh, okay.
repository.
What you was talking about right now. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Bazel
so
build
I'm
is
gonna
the org in GitHub. Okay.
yeah, Bazel builds the org and rules license. So there's a lot of work here. My colleague Tony has done a tremendous amount of work in this. Lots of examples, but I'll just show you briefly. Examples SBOMs. I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of this particular rule. And there's a lot about Blaze here that if you don't know Blaze at all, then I'm going to kind of jump in kind of right in the middle here. But basically, all I'm saying here is that there is a rule that will generate an SBOM. This happens to be an SPDX SBOM. And it's going to generate an SBOM for the tool itself that's generating the SBOM. So it's a little bit meta.
But yeah.
It was convenient, at least. So let me give you my terminal really quick.
Don't worry, it has become so. This is as I was saying at the beginning, I didn't mention it, but this is the 5th episode of this series of SPDX ecosystem interviews. And on Tuesday we had GitHub, and they did the same example. They ran the SBOM of their SBOM generation tool, and it's great. I find it. I mean, for demo purposes, it's just fantastic. So don't worry at all.
So I am going to just build this particular target. So I'm checked out into the rules license repository here. This is the same repo that I was just showing you in my browser. So I've asked Bazel to generate for me. I've asked it to build this rule, and it's already done this. And I've said cheated, and I did this previously, so it already had it cached. But you can actually see here, there's two things that are interesting. So here is the SBOM itself, and you're going to be underwhelmed. It's pretty minimal. But you can see this is that tag value format that SPDX is using. And we're populating it with a handful of simple metadata. We've got there. Hang on a second, Shorty. I'm blocking.
Oh, don't worry at all.
I'm blocking all of the cars.
No worries.
Hang on 1 second. I'm gonna.
Yeah. Take your time. So for you're seeing value card, value tag format in the screen right now. There's JSON. You can do it in JSON too, if you feel more comfortable with it. Both of them are incredibly human readable and, of course, machine readable.
So we've got, yeah, okay, sorry, I'm back.
No worries at all.
So that they could all leave this morning to get kids to camp and whatnot, and I'm blocking their cars. So there's that, and then
we're about to finish, by the way, so let them know. I'll release you very soon.
In this intermediate file as well that you can see the Bazel generated for us. This is actually, I would call this is like the implementation detail, but this is actually this intermediate format that we're using to generate the SPDX document. So this is more of a little in between Bazel's graph.
The translation, right?
Yeah, this is sort of what we're using to do a lot of these little translation stuff. Yeah, and then there's a tool as well if you go back through the underlying Bazel rules. So just to give you a quick taste of what this all is, this rule is coming from this other program, this other Bazel file that was loaded. So there's this rules gathering, and then we have generate SBOM, and then you can see the definition of this rule. So this rule itself, it's kind of hard to read, but just to give you a quick flavor of what this is and how this works, we have quite a few rules in here. But up here you can see, at least I can kind of point to this. We have the tool itself that actually writes the SBOM as part of this repo itself. And this is one of these things that in Bazel where this is kind of configurable, so we can go through and we could change this, we could adapt this. This is something that's modifiable. If we didn't want to write SPDX, for example, if we wanted a different SBOM generator, then as long as it can sort of pick up that intermediate format that I just showed you, then that would work as well. So yeah, very, very extensible. Lots of things in here. This one happens to be in Python. So pretty simple. I don't think this one's actually using any of the. Yeah, we're not using any of the SPDX Python libraries in here. We are internally, but this one I think because it's kind of just a minimal demonstration of how this stuff is all meant to operate. But yeah, it's all self-contained. But this library is great. It's very actively maintained by my colleague Tony. Yeah, we're trying to export everything that we're doing internally for this. We're trying to export as much in the same style as we kind of can to this project because like you said, we have this long history of open source development and working with the open source communities.
Absolutely.
We want to still maintain. These tools are interesting because they're really trying to support all those copyright holders and all those open source authors. We do want to try to support them as easily as possible. And given that Bazel is external and we have lots of folks using it, having this method of annotating software to say this has this particular license, this is over here, this has this copyright holder, etc. This is the same thing. We've just spent the last year and a half annotating our internal code base as well. So this is the same thing that we're doing internally, and because of the way that Blaze is built, and because of the flexibility and the comprehensiveness of SPDX, we're actually able to get all this done. Nice. The hardest part for me, to be honest, was actually go back through the however many third-party packages we have and actually go annotate them. The SPDX part was the delightful part of my day, and it didn't really take me a lot of time. And I got all those nostalgic flashbacks of trying to explain to people. I saw they're like, "What's this RDF thing?" and what are these triples and how does this stuff work? And that was delightful. It brought me back to those days back in the day when I was like, "All right, we're gonna talk about generic knowledge representation, things like that." So
that's fun.
That was the happy part. The slog, like I said, was annotating the whatever thousands of third-party packages.
Oh my god!
Go add some more rules, and it was fun.
Okay, so I have a bit of bad news for you. I saw in the document that you were using 2.2 SPDX. We, as I said before, we're launching 3.0. We have launched actually 3.0 release candidate 1. We will soon release another release candidate because the community has contributed. Just a reminder for everyone, SPDX, whether it's 2.2, 2.3, or 3.0 or any of the future versions, the community delivers 4 things: a specification, the model, which is the visual representation of it, the low-level libraries for those vendors and other projects like Yocto and others to build on top of it, high-level tools, let's call it that, and eventually the license list. This is a separate asset that we create that many people reference and include for licensing purposes, like the one that Tyler just described. So we've got an update for those of you using SPDX. Hopefully, eventually you join. And whatever new, I mean, you update your own the course that you do to the old one, but no rush with that. But one of the new things that is coming out, that has already come out with 3.0 in the release candidate version, but also obviously in the GA, is profiles. Because as you were mentioning, I mean, you didn't mention it directly, but one will get the impression from the usage that Basil does of SPDX right now that it's limited only to licensing to the licensing use case, and that's not completely true. The original SPDX was originally conceived to solve for that use case, but it's gone way beyond that. In fact, your colleague Brandon Lum, who does not only co-maintain the SPDX Go libraries, but he's contributed one of the profiles. So what the community has done is that since SPDX was being used to solve for licensing, but also build attestations and again, building SBOMs and communicating data sets, licensing problems and other types of problems and so forth for AI, for the training the models of AI and so forth. They were using it for those. These people, or the people that wanted to solve for specific use cases, did not need all of SPDX, did not need knowledge of the complete array of assets that I just described and the spec in itself, which is really, really comprehensive. So what we've done is created subsets of items of SPDX that are relevant for the use case. So if you want to use SPDX to consume SBOMs for build purposes, you will just need the build profile, which is the profile that Brandon, your colleague, and others, and Nisha and others have created and co-maintain right now. So please join the community if you're interested in that. But again, we've released 6 profiles right now. You can go to the blog post to the blog in spdx.dev and find about all of them, and to the website, of course. But yeah, it is a bit overwhelming. Raw vanilla SPDX. Don't feel overwhelmed. We have a profile for you. And again, Brandon is one of the most active members of the community, with providing contributions to the Go library, to the build profile, and to other many open source projects that provide transparency and security to the software supply chain, like WAC and others that Google is really kindly supporting. So yeah, that will be all from my side in terms of promotion from SPDX. Again, if you're interested in Bazel, if you're interested in build speeds and consistent build and debugging your build and stuff like that, you should consider Bazel. You should. That's a must. And if you get interested in it, join the Slack community. Try attending or just joining the streams of the conferences at Bazel Build later this year for New York, probably. I don't know, because it's an amazing tool. I mean, like many companies use it, big and small, and it's just a freakingly good build system. And other than that, I honestly don't have anything else. Tyler, did we miss anything that you wanted to touch upon, or are you good to go to help your family with your day-to-day
I think they found my car keys. I think that was the hard part. I haven't.
And you've been left alone at your new house. They
don't
need you.
Still. They don't. They're good. They're good without me. I just have to take care of the dogs. The dogs are apparently a gas leak. I have to wait for that.
Oh gosh, no! Oh my god! Yeah, I don't want to keep you more because you've been generous enough to attend all of us and to do this and early in the morning for you.
My pleasure.
In a house that is still unfurnished and unpackaged in a way, I guess. So you've been really kind. Hopefully,
Thanks,
this
Jordan.
drives more interest in SPDX and Bazel because both things are really good, and the combination of both is great. And yeah, that's all. Have a lovely rest of the day and the week.
Thanks a lot, Jordy.